Alrighty, the Iowa Hawkeyes have their draws, their path for the 2024 NCAA Championships in Kansas City, and it's a mixed bag of draws for the Hawkeyes. There's a couple things going on. On the one hand, you can look at their seeds and say, man, pretty tough seeds. You got someone as good as Franck gets the 10, someone as good as Cendo the 6. But if you take a closer look, it's really not about the seed, it's about the path, right? And I think you'll find that in some of these, they have a decent path, even though it is maybe on paper the seed looks difficult. We're going to get into it. I'm going to get into the good draws and the tough draws for the Iowa Hawkeyes. All right, starting at, I'm not going to go necessarily in weight class order. I'm going to bounce around from the good draws to the tough draws, but starting at 125, you look for Drake Ayala. He got the 3 seed. That's good. And you look at his path. Eli Griffin, he already wrestled and beat him this year. Jet Strickenberger or Nico Provo in round 2. Provo was ranked number 1 in America at a point in time, but I think it's going to be Jet here. Jet's been wrestling a little bit better. Jet is tricky. He's scrambly. He's tough on top, but I think Drake's going to have too much of an advantage there on the feet, and I think he makes it to that quarterfinal where I think he'll face Troy Spratley again. Now, it could be Cooper Flynn that makes it to him, but I would be a little surprised if that were the case. I think Spratley's had a little better year, can score a little bit more. So that's a rematch potentially for Drake, and I think Drake's the favorite there slightly. On paper, it was an overtime match, but Spratley didn't give himself many opportunities to score in that match. It was, I think, Drake that was able to get to the legs a couple times, not many. There's not much separating them, but he was able to get the final score in sudden victory. So that's not bad. I have been making the semis before falling to Jacob Camacho. Let's be honest, Drake can make the finals here. Luke Stanich could be his semifinals opponent if he makes it. Could be D'Agostino, Eric Barnett. D'Agostino, for whatever reason, Drake can't beat him. He can beat him. He has beaten him, but this year hasn't been able to do it. But it's a navigable path for Drake Ayala. And should he get bounced, if he gets bounced in that quarter, which I think is the first time he's really, truly vulnerable, he drops down to a round of 12 match against either Richard Figueroa or Caleb Smith. Figueroa and him wrestled back in the Who's Number 1 days when they were in high school. Figs is really tough. Caleb Smith, he's beaten Caleb Smith. So you'd feel decent about that matchup for Drake. If he loses in the quarter, you wrestle in the round of 12. I think he'd win that. And then he'd have someone like Jory Volk or D'Agostino or Steve-O in that next match to determine the placement. So I think either way, top side, bottom, he can go on a deep run. He's got a really solid path to make the finals. He's got a path to make a deep run. As it stands, I have him losing in the semifinal round to Camacho and then loses in the next match to Luke Stanich. But if he can avoid Stanich, I think Stanich may be a really tough matchup for Drake. I think he could go on a run to that 3rd, 4th place match. So all in all, not a bad match, not a bad draw for Drake Ayala at 125 pounds. I think he's set up pretty well there, actually. We'll move to 141, actually. The weight of Real Woods. Now, Real is a returning national finalist, and I thought for a 3 seed, this is a great draw because you could have seen a scenario, the 3 gets the 6 in their quarter. If you had someone like Brock Hardy or Sergio Limley in that quarter, be a lot tougher matchup. As it stands, it's going to be Lachlan McNeil, who he's wrestled before. He won pretty solidly. So I feel like Real is not going to be too vulnerable till a semifinal match because as you look at it, but as I say that, round 1 for you Hawkeye fans, have you a little nervous because this is Clay Carlson who beat Real Woods, I want to say last time they wrestled, which was some years ago, 2021, I believe, NCAAs, back when Real was at Stanford. But Carlson is a 2-time All-American. He is stingy. He's really strong. It's not someone that's going to get blown out by Real Woods, I wouldn't suspect. So a tough round 1 match for Real Woods. So that's not ideal, but you take that tough round 1. But this round 2, Hines or Vasquez, you feel great about Real there. Lachlan McNeil or Josh Quarterhant, you'd feel great about Real there. I mean, it wasn't too tough a match for him at the Salute. And then you got Bo Bartlett, someone you have beaten before, and you got to beat him again. And it wasn't a good match at Carver Hawkeye Arena, but he can make the finals here and end up being the national champion. That can't be discounted as the reality. Now, should he lose to, let's say, worst case scenario, he drops a match to Lachlan McNeil in that quarter, he would have someone like Brock Hardy in the round of 12, or Sergio Limley, one of those type of guys. So really, really tough round of 12 match should you drop that quarter. So that win in that quarter is essential for Real Woods. Not essential, ideal, right? Because you don't want someone as tough as Brock Hardy or Sergio Limley just to place. And if you win that one, you have someone like the path gets navigable. You have Cale Happel, then maybe someone like Anthony Echemendia. This is getting down the line on the backside, and there's so much variability there. But this is what it sort of looks like on paper for Real Woods should he lose in that quarterfinal round. As it stands, I think he loses in the semi to Bo, where he'll face. So he'll drop down to that consolation semi against, I think, Sergio Limley. Could be Ryan Jack. Could be Cole Matthews. But I think it's probably Limley, and I think Real wrestles back and gets third. So all in all, not a bad draw for Real Woods. The path is there for him to make the final. I think if things go poorly, I think he's still got a great opportunity to place and place very high at 141, scoring essential team points for the Iowa Hawkeyes at 141. They're in a dogfight for a trophy this year. Okay, we're looking at 157 now for the Hawks, and I mentioned Jared Franck. He got the 10 seed. And on the one hand, it's sort of like Real, where his first round matchup, Joey Blaze, that's tough. Joey Blaze has beaten Peyton Robb and Ed Scott this year, the 8 seed and the 4 seed. So this kid is no joke, and that's a tough matchup. But I think Franck wins that match. And then I think it may be a little more navigable against Peyton Keller in round 2. And then he's got Ja'Cory Teamer, who he's wrestled close in the past. And then, Meyer probably waits, or Brayton Lee, or even Cody Chittum, Cardenas in that other semi. But for Franck, I think this is a pretty decent draw for him. And as I look at the backside options, I don't think it's realistic for Franck to make the finals. It could happen, right? I think avoiding Levi Haynes is important. And he looked pretty good at conferences, even though he had to forfeit out. I think he's reasonably healthy. I don't think there's a ton of concern there. But if he loses in round 2 to Peyton Keller, his path back is treacherous. And if he's losing to the Peyton Kellers, it's a long shot for him to place. He'd have to go through Chase Saldate, then likely Vinny Zerbin or Teague Travis, then Bryce Andonian, potentially in the round of 12. If it's not Andonian, it could be someone like Ed Scott or Ryder Downey. So that's just to get to the round of 12. So really, really hard. If he loses in round 2, I really don't think he does. I think he makes that quarter against Ja'Cory. And if he drops that one, someone like Blockus or Downey in the round of 12, that's winnable but tough. I mean, that's a guy he lost to in Blockus. And then potentially Peyton Robb or Brayton Lee in the next round. So a lot of really competitive matches. That's the way this bracket is with 157. It's the deepest weight in the country. So he's just got to stay topside as long as he can, right? If he can beat Ja'Cory Teamer, that changes things. Then he's got Will Lewan in the consolation semi. He can beat Will Lewan. And then it's potentially someone like Ed Scott, Peyton Robb wrestling for third. So that's the path for Jared Franck. Not too bad for a 10 seed. Remember, a 10 seed. This is not that bad of a draw. I think it's something where there's hay to be made for Jared Franck out of this weight class. All right, 165. You got Michael Caliendo. Again, I like his path, especially to make the quarters. I'd feel pretty certain he's going to be wrestling in that quarterfinal round. I think his opponents could be Julian Ramirez. Now, I've gone back and forth on this match. I think he can win it and punch his ticket to the semis, but there he will go no further because Mitchell Messenbree looms. So you're looking quarters or semis are kind of the cap for Michael Caliendo. I don't think he can go any higher than that. Looking on the backside, if he makes the semi and loses to Mitchell, he's going to have like Dean Hamady and if he beats him, David Carr, but I think he'd probably lose to Hamady, right? So probably wrestling for 5th and 6th. And I feel like all paths here, as I've looked through this bracket, I feel like all paths lead to Caliendo wrestling for that 5th and 6th place match. Whether he wins in the quarter or the semi, I feel like that's the way it's going. So if he loses in the quarter, someone like Antrell Taylor in the round of 12, then Cam Amin next round, he's beaten him, and then he'd have David Carr in that consolation semi. So he's looking at either Hamady or Carr in that consolation semi. I don't think he's beaten either of those guys. So wrestling for 5th and 6th. So it feels like he's on a pretty well-defined path. Even if he makes the semis, while you want that guaranteed All-American points, I feel like either way, losing in the quarters, semis, we're going to see a pretty similar outcome for Mikey Caliendo. So that's my read on 65 for the Iowa Hawkeyes and Caliendo. As we move to 74, I think Kennedy for the 12 seed, I think you love where he's sitting. Now, nothing's easy out of the 12, but if there's a 5 seed in the bracket of any weight you can choose to have, I think it's Philip Canigliaro, just based on what we've seen from Canigliaro at EIWAs where he took 2 losses. And that's who Kennedy would have in round 2. And I think that's a match he's going to win. I think he's favored in it. Now, it gets a little more interesting in that quarterfinal round against Shane Griffith, who whooped him, no doubt, in the dual meet. A little closer, I think, next time. But Griffith's hurt. So there's a reality where Kennedy wrestles in the semis. I don't think you can rule that out given the health concerns with Shane Griffith. But he's capped at the semi. I don't think he can beat Carter Starachi. I don't think he can beat Mekhi Lewis. One of those guys is going to be waiting in that semifinal round. So Kennedy's capped at the semi. He could make the quarters. He could drop in round 2. If he drops in round 2, I still feel all right about it, although I'd be surprised. If he drops in round 2, it's someone like Danny Wask, then Brody Conley, Lennox Wolak in the round of 12. I think he beats those guys. And then I think it'd be someone like Edmund Ruth or Rocco Welsh in that first All-American round. And Ruth he's already beaten. Welsh he didn't. So if Ruth you're feeling a little bit better about. But that's if he loses. This is all if he loses in round 2. If he hits that quarter, he'll have someone like MJ Gaitan or Braden Thompson in the round of 12. And then round after that, it's the Mekhi or Carter Starachi loser. So that points to potentially a 7th place, wrestling in the 7th place round for Patrick Kennedy, which still you take out of the 12 seed. But I think, honestly, if he loses, it's weird though, if he loses in that second round, he's actually sort of set up better to go on a run, but there's so much more risk there too, because you have to win so many more matches to place. 2 extra matches on the backside to get to that All-American round. But after All-American round, it clears out a little bit. It's, as I mentioned, Lennox Wolak and Edmund Ruth. So winnable, navigable. So that's 174 for Patrick Kennedy. 197, this is the start of the tough draws. Now, Glazier has been incredible this year for the Hawks. The number one story for the Iowa Hawkeyes this year is the performance of Zach Glazier at 197. And for his efforts, he earned a 7 seed. But he's going to be challenged. He'll be challenged in round 1 against Andy Smith of Virginia Tech. Not an easy out. And then in round 2, he'll have a rematch against Silas Allred, who he majored, so that can give you encouragement if you're an Iowa fan. But he's also, Silas Allred's been looking really good. He got 3rd at Big Tens. Zach got 2nd. And I think this is not going to look like the major decision we saw last time around. Now, should Zach win there, he's capped. He's not going beyond the quarters because I don't think he can beat Trent Hidley, right? So whether he's going to lose in either, in my opinion, round 2 or the quarterfinals on the top side. So what do those 2 paths look like? Well, if he loses in round 2 to Silas, someone like Cole Urbis, Joey Novak, and then he's in the round of 12, where I think he's going to face Rocky Elam. Now, it could be Michael Beard. It could be Jacob Cardenas. Those are all tough matches. So if he loses in round 2 to Allred, it's a really tough round of 12 matchup. It's going to be a combination of Rocky, Michael Beard, or Jacob Cardenas. That's rough. That's just a rough draw. Now, should he win and beat Silas Allred, which I think is going to be close to essential, it's a little more navigable. I think it's someone like he'll get the Volker Cardenas winner in the round of 12, and you don't have those extra 2 matches you have to wrestle just to get to the round of 12. If he beats Cardenas, which I think is a tough matchup for Glazier, to be honest, it's someone like Jackson Smith, who he's already beaten. So you can see we're all past sort of, he's all but guaranteed to wrestle in the round of 12, and the combination of wrestlers he's going to have to beat in the round of 12 are, I think, tough matchups for Zach Glazier. So while he's had a great season, the path, he's going to have to make his own path here, and he's got to win a match that I think is going to be tough for him to earn All-American honors for Iowa. So that's a tough one for the Hawks because he's been such a positive story. 133 now, we'll look at for Brody Tesky, he's another one. He's pretty capped here. Derek Cardinal in round 1. Cardinal's tough. I think Brody will win, but I would not look past that matchup. If he loses to Cardinal, let's play that out. He would have Max Lee, then Nick Bouzakis, potentially, then Julian Klebov, Kai Orini. Losable matches after that first one, really. I mean, there are some really hard wrestlers to beat just to get to the round of 12, where I think he'll face someone like Kai Orini or Vito Arujau. So really tough set of matches there for Brody if he loses in round 1. And if you lose in round 1, there's not great hope for you. Now, if he loses in round 2, which is what I predict will happen, because beyond that, he would have to go to make the quarterfinal. Brody would have to beat Ryan Crookham. I think that doesn't seem realistic, right? So Brody loses in round 2. Braxton Brown is his first match in the Wrestleback. That's a tough match. Braxton Brown is tough. He's talented. He can score. Next up would be Nasir Bailey or Aaron Nagao in his second Wrestleback match. This is before the round of 12. So he'd have to beat Braxton Brown and Nagao or Bailey just to get to the round of 12, where he's going to get the loser of Dylan Shaver, Dylan Ragusin. I don't know, I think you're probably hoping for Shaver there if you're Iowa, because he was right there to beat him at Big Tens. But that's just to get to the round of 12. So this is not great, but Brody's not been great this year. He's been solid. He's had moments, but it's looking like there's not a great path for Brody Tesky to place. If you're looking for one, he needs to win that first one. Then he's got to somehow get by Nasir Bailey or Aaron Nagao. It's treacherous. It's treacherous either way for Brody. 149, Caleb Rachi. On the one hand, he's got Jordan Williams round 1, a guy that he lost to in the regular season. On the other, Jordan Williams might be injured. He forfeited, or he injury defaulted out of his Big 12 final. So how healthy he is a question. So for Rachi, he can lose in round 1 or round 2. I don't see him getting past Caleb Henson in round 2. Henson is he's a title contender, and Rachi's been tough, but I'm not sure we're ready to put him in Caleb Henson's strata. So I think he's losing in round 1 or round 2. Now, if he loses in round 1, he's going through Alec Martin, Dylan D'Amelio, Willie McDougall, then Casey Swiderski in round of 12. Actually, not the worst path if you lose in round 1. I think I could see a scenario where he wins all those matches. Now, D'Amelio would be a tough one. D'Amelio's good, and of course Casey Swiderski, absolute dog, and that's that. But it's Caleb Rachi. He's seeded, what is he seeded? 13th. You know, that's a hard match, right? So when you consider that, it's nothing but tough pass for a 13 seed. Now, should he win that first match and then lose to Henson, it's Zargo, Ethan Miller, and then someone like Carl Parko or Kasak in the round of 12. If it's Kasak, on the one hand, you beat him. On the other hand, Kasak beat you pretty good the next time around. So I don't know what you're feeling better about. You probably want to just stay topside as long as you can. But I can't lie. If he loses in round 1, the Wrestleback path is not too bad for Rachi. But either way, it's going to be tough for him to get on the podium. There's no two ways about it. All right, next weight, heavyweight, Bradley Hill. Going to be tough for Brad. And I think, him making it to NCAAs is kind of around where expectations were coming into this year. And I don't think he's going to go beyond that. I think he's got a tough first-round match against Owen Treffen. And it's interesting because I think NC State, and that's where Treffen goes, and Iowa are going to be in a dogfight for that second, third, fourth battle. So that could be a key matchup, but Treffen's going to be a favorite there. So I don't see Hill getting too far beyond. I think he could beat Keaton Cleaver after losing in round 1. And then, but Tay Gadali potentially looming in that second Wrestleback. So it's not really the draw for Bradley Hill. It's just kind of what he's been this year. And so yeah, that's the draws for Iowa. Some good. It was more good than bad. I know we're ending on kind of a sour note. I'm kind of regretting how I did that. But either way, I think the Hawks are in a decent position to contend for a trophy, despite the fact, don't get caught up in the 9th place projected points. I went through and did every match result. I think the Hawks, by my projections, which are just mine, they're not the seeds, I think they're going to be right there in that top 4 dogfight, and I think they're potentially going to be bringing home a trophy. So